Tonia here, your host of the Alchemy of Me, where we navigate the anatomy of humanity through the lens of science and spirituality. Let's unearth the layers and unravel the systems in place that dim who we are and how we live and experience life. On this journey together, we'll weave in an eclectic blend of mind, body, energy medicine, concepts, tools, and practices that'll nourish the seeds, the fire, that gold of intelligence that is you. This is an opportunity, your opportunity to reclaim, to rediscover, to transform, to alchemize you. The Alchemy of Me show starts now.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Alchemy of Me. I am your host, Tonia Johnson. I'm joined with the amazing Luke Mulvaugh from the Sacred Walk Initiative, and we are so excited to kind of bring this all together. You know, this is episode 3 of our 3-part series on really just getting curious about our ancestors and ancestral healing and really getting I don't know, for me it's like I think of the word clarity around what that looks like. First of all, what it is, and then some of the tools. I think that's kind of some of the parts we're going to bring in today to just kind of wrap it all up. Like, how do we really step into our sacred purpose and into like why we are here in this moment right now, and how we do that, and then kind of the tools and what's available to us in this. When you think of like spirituality and like tapping into these things that are maybe they're it's not as clear, it's not black and white, in a world where everything is very black and white. We're stepping into this area of the unknown, into the gray. And I just want to share, like, for my own experience, this walking on this journey with Luke has been super powerful for my own healing journey. Specifically just having these, like, this better understanding for what we're talking about, and then also like really grounding it into these practices that we'll get to a little bit later on. So as I shut myself down from the rambling, I want to again welcome you back, Luke.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I am wonderful. I am feeling again a lot of energy today, a lot of movement. So I think there's a lot of power behind our conversations, and I feel that. And so I am not going to go into your bio again today because, whether somebody has, this is their 3rd time, joining us, then I don't need to do that to them. And then also really invitation for anyone where maybe this is the first time that we've danced together in this way. Just allowing for your medicine, like, coming through just by being, like, experiencing you without all the constructs of the titles or the background, just to feel. And I think that is the feeling, connecting in with who we are and why we are here, is potent. And so I don't know, I know where we're going to start out, and it feels powerful. And so maybe let's just dive right in, if that sounds good.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, oh my God, this is what happens. Excuse me. So talking about, I'm sure, talking about our ancestors and this journey that, we think we are here alone. A lot of times it feels lonely, and we are not, clearly. And I want to get started in this discussion around like, what does this even mean? Like, we have ancestors, and we're connected to them. When when they pass on, whether we knew them or not. Like, let's talk about that and what that looks like within the lens of like your work.
Okay. Talk about, so could you frame that
Yeah.
question again?
Yeah.
A
So
little bit.
so first of all, let's start out with like big picture, like what is a trapped ancestor? What does
Okay.
that mean?
A trap. So historically, uh, the reason why communities, tribes, even our old ancestors who, were nature-based cosmology, they had such elaborate death rites was because they understood intimately that the journey of the soul from this physical embodiment to the next plane was an intense journey, and that intense journey needed to be protected. It needed to be supported, both community and then through ceremonially. And then over time, which had a lot to do with just the diaspora across the planet over the past several thousand years, uh, there's been a loss of those death rites in a lot of different cultures and communities. And so due to that fact, there was less care given to when somebody was, when their life ended, right? Or when they left this physical body. And then also due to the fact that over the past several thousand years, there's been an intense amount of human death and destruction in ways that is pretty grotesque.
Mhm.
It has led to many souls that uh, have become trapped because they died in a very horrendous way. The proper death rites were provided for them to be able to make sure their soul went on to the next plane, and they were trapped. So, like a great example would just be in the American West. If a caravan or a wagon train was going across the West and they run into a group of bandits, maybe they were just mountain men bandits, right? And they were all murdered in that wagon train and just left there. And the entire wagon train was taken out, then all those individuals, their souls die right in that space. And if they're tragically murdered, then and the proper ceremonies aren't performed, then they would become trapped. Okay. Because we're connected to our ancestors, they always trap human spirits have a connection into us through our DNA. And when an ancestor is, or a human spirit is trapped, it's trapped in a certain vibrational state. And they're basically just on a feedback loop. So that vibrational state could be fear, could be greed, it could be power, it could be perversion, it could be a whole mixture of things. But that vibrational state is a loop, okay, that this human spirit lives or not lives through. They're in spirit form, but they experience every single day over and over. That is connected into us through our DNA, okay? Because the state they're trapped in is corded into our consciousness. So that vibrational state they're trapped in creates an energetic pattern, okay? And that energetic pattern over time creates and impacts human behavior, all right? So what ends up happening is these trapped ancestors then pass forward these ancestral patterns that hold this energetic frequency in our consciousness that are then actualized in physical reality. So a simple example is, say if there's a feminine line, and that feminine line has a distinct fear of men. All right, that feminine line also could have a perpetuated pattern of women in that line being assaulted by men. Okay. And so that pattern could be created by, like, and we've actually seen this happen by 500 years ago, a whole bunch of women were burned at the stake and they died in intense states of fear and suffering. And that fear and suffering is then trapped on that line, okay, which then manifests these certain patterns of behavior that play out in physical reality. One of them being women, excuse me, being consistently sexually assaulted by men generationally, which essentially in its form is men, this domination of women by the patriarch. Okay. And we have even seen that with people we've worked with where maybe the woman's issue that we're working with is they're afraid to use their voice. And if they use their voice, it allows them to step further into their purpose. And they see that they need to use their voice because they're being challenged in these ways by the universe to step forward into their own power. But every time they go to try to use their voice, they literally can't talk and they can't empower themselves. So we, as this process of excavating the consciousness goes on, we have literally had women ancestors that have been burned at the stake 500, 600, 700 years ago show up in these women's lives and tell them that if they use their voice, they will die. And that fear is trapped on the living relative's consciousness, okay? And so the way that pattern has manifested into the modern day is this woman is disempowered because she's afraid to use her voice. But what it stems from is these trapped ancestors from long ago that are trapped in this energetic space of fear and terror and then being fully oppressed by men. And so that's a pretty abridged version of how that energy can move through the line. And what's important to note is the ancestral patterning is reinforced by the reality of the lived experience. It's also reinforced by ways that ancestrally were taught from generation to generation. And then things that were taught, which we can see in certain women's lives, women are literally taught to not use their voice because it's not safe. And maybe that goes back 25 generations of where women have been taught that and taught that and taught that and taught that. So that's the teachings of the lineage. But then at the source point of it is this energetic frequency of these trapped ancestors who are trapped in this loop of fear and terror. And someone has asked me, well, don't they realize that these ancestors from long ago realize that, like, my existence is not such that if I use my voice, I will be burned at the stake? And my explanation is no, that's the loop they're trapped in. So they're literally living in that feedback loop or experiencing that feedback loop every day of their existence, which is why it can become so potent. Because if you have an ancestor who's literally trapped in a feedback loop of terror and fear and intense suffering, literally being burned alive, like, that's a potent energy. And you should see what those energies will manifest generationally in people's lines into certain forms of mental and physical sickness when you go 600, 700 years ago to present day. How is that?
That's my throat trying to open up, because I just want to, first of all, thank you, Luke. I want to normalize this, because and just draw this. So if anybody that's listening, if you're feeling any discomfort in your body or anything really coming up, I'm just going to say, like, my heart is racing right now. I'm calling it up because this is part of heart is racing. I can feel like I am lit up inside right now, and it felt very tight on my throat. I don't know, maybe I'm a little more I'm a little sensitive to picking up on this, but that is too because I have leaned into this because I know this is a big part of my healing journey. And it's interesting that the feminine this piece has come up for me because I know I've done some past life stuff and that, there is clearly some of that in my own history. And at the same time, one of the things I did for myself that felt like almost like I was gonna die was saying yes to this show because of that specifically, like it is not safe to be seen and to be heard. And so because I am a freaking ridiculous, like I say no, anytime something comes up, I think it's like it's part of it's like, yes, like let's face this. Like we don't need to fear this anymore. Um, we can do this together. And there's so many amazing people to support us in this way. And so, Luke, I want to ask you sort of kind of a follow-up on that, for anybody that's feeling uncomfortable, just to know that's your body saying something. Can you kind of describe what that is?
Yeah, that would indicate that you most likely have ancestors that are trapped in your consciousness that through me speaking and having the altar behind us, that are pulling stuff out of your consciousness, but also there's this term called ancestral interference, where we have literally, so I use the example of the women ancestors come forward to tell these women that if they use their voice, they will die. Well, beyond that, we've had these experiences of women where the patriarchal ancestors come forth and they try to hold that woman in place. Literally, we've had some of those patriarchal ancestors come into ceremony and say, "We own you." And obviously that can't hold. Those ancestors get crossed over too, which creates healing for the entire line. But that's the level of intensity of interference that can come. And I'll share a brief story that will help put this in context. This was like a year and a half ago, and I won't use the individual's name, but the individual, I met them at a gathering, and they were familiar with our work. And so she reached out at the end of the summer and said, I have to take my daughter to college in a year. And I keep having these intense panic attacks and anxiety attacks that when I take her to college, she's going to die. And it's not rational. I know it's not rational. I'm afraid to go talk to anybody about it because I don't want to be put on meds. I know it's irrational, but the panic is debilitating. And I can't sleep. I can't eat when it comes on. And so I said, okay, I have a good idea of probably what's going on. So she lost contact for a bit, didn't go through with working with us. So, and she was from out of state, out of Montana. So the next summer, I get a call from her, and she's driving out to Montana, and she's driving through South Dakota, and she calls me up and she said, "I'm supposed to take my daughter to college in 2 weeks. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I'm in a constant state of panic. I've lost weight. And I know it's irrational, but I feel like as soon as I drop her off at college, she's going to die. I'm never going to see her again." And so I say, okay, well, when are you going to be in town? And I said, considering you're so mentally and physically debilitated, I'm going to have you prepare this way, which likewise, this was more an emergency ceremony in context, like, because we like people to prepare for a long time for this. But due to how debilitated she was, so as soon as you get into town, I'm going to have you prepare for this for a half a day. We'll bring you in the sweat and bring you into the ceremony. I had her make the crossing over altar and start. And so we go in the ceremony, and all of these women ancestors come in that were trapped and they had lost children.
Mm.
Going generationally back, they have witnessed their children died, some murdered, but they had all lost children. Then all of these children came in who were trapped, because one of the most common things that happens when a parent loses a child is they call that child back because they're so heartbroken. So the child doesn't actually transition. It's quite common.
Ugh.
So all of these children came in, and this is the kind of thing where I'm facilitating this, but the individual who is going through this experience, they understand what is going on. This is not a me telling them, hey, this is what's up. This is us working together, her having full awareness that this is what's going on. So we have this beautiful ceremony, bringing these women and these children back together, and then transitioning all of them. So we get out of the ceremony, no anxiety, starts eating again. She takes her daughter to college 2 weeks later from the ceremony, no emotional reaction at all. When that week, she said it was the anxiety and the panic was so debilitating that she wasn't able to function in her daily life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of the level that these trapped ancestors and this ancestral interference can have on your mental and physical health. It's a very real thing. And because it's not anywhere in our diagnostic framework with allopathic medicine, and even in our spiritual framework of assessing what's going on in our mental physical health, it's a blind spot. We uncovered the blind spot due to working with so many people and running so many ceremonies and seeing this as a density and as an issue that had to be addressed. So this wasn't us like saying, hey, we want to figure this out. This was being presented to us over time in the ceremonial space as an issue that was having a legitimate and profound impact on people's mental and physical health. And that story is an example of that. And I could tell many stories similar to that, where people had severe mental and physical health issues that were solely related to ancestral interference, trapped ancestors, and the accumulation of that ancestral pattern. And I know in your situation, we've even talked about some of the things you've gone through being most likely directly connected into that ancestral realm as well.
Yeah, and we could just, and I don't know if you want to bring that in now, or actually let's take a little break. Let's do that. Let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to weave in again, whether it's right away or later on, kind of our time in ceremony and that experience. And
Sure.
obviously I mean, you can share anything. So I'm an open book.
Ah,
So,
great.
so we will be right back. Welcome back. I am Tonia, your host of the Alchemy of Me, and I am joined by Luke Mulvaugh of the Sacred Walk Initiative. And we are, again, just wrapping up our part 3 of our 3-part series, where we have been dancing along here around this with our ancestors and kind of the healing process and what it looks like to come back into alignment with our sacred purpose. So I needed to take a break. If that wasn't clear to anybody, there's a lot of energy that moves when we are doing this work. And I mean that in like it's, to me, I'm like, heck yeah, like this is, let's go. Right. And it's all about growing and expansion. And, Luke, you'd mentioned, the excavation process, and it's the words that, I don't know, are just coming up are like, these are your words now, like purification and reclamation. And so it's that letting go. And then I think of the reclaiming, who we are and why we're here. And so as we kind of continue on this journey, I want to talk about my experience with you in ceremony, and that kind of that profound effect it had on me personally, and I know for so many others. And so, yeah, just, maybe if we just talk a little, because we haven't really talked about what that means to be in ceremony with this tradition. And so can you kind of just give us what does that look like? And then let's just kind of weave this story together.
Sure. When we're talking about ceremony, specifically, or when I'm talking about it, we're specifically referencing a sweat lodge ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
The particular style that I run is a Lakota style. And I was taught by, I think I told the story last episode of the medicine, Sundance chief medicine man that told me to build a sweat. And so I've been doing that for 15 years. And that's because we do so much with purification and the bear, which really cleans people out. That's our space that we use for all forms of ceremony. When we go into that space, you go into the spirit world. There's literally a song that we sing, all the singings in Lakota, there's a song that we sing that creates that transition of moving the physical to the spirit world. And it's a 4-round ceremony. And when you move into the spirit world, part of the way we run ceremony is, people would call me the intercessor, but we really pride ourselves on opening the door for people to engage with the spirit world themselves. So I'm not big on the channeling thing in terms of me channeling something and telling you information. What I've been taught both by humans and the angelic realms is my job is to open the door for other people to communicate with what they need, and then me to help facilitate that along in the ways that I need to with the information that I get. So in the example I just used, that woman is, I'm not telling her, hey, there's a bunch of women in here and their children. She already knows that intuitively and consciously. And so you could have a ceremony with 20 people and they're all engaging with the spirit world in their own way, it's a really beautiful thing because it becomes very powerful. And it's a movement away from this hierarchical form of spirituality where there has to be somebody on top who tells everybody else what's going on. And the laws specifically say like those days are over. It's time for us all to be able to connect and use the ceremonial vessels. And the beauty of, it's such a blessing because the Chinoopa tradition has the Honka ceremony, the making of the relative. And what I've been taught by the gentleman who taught me, the elders that taught me, was that Chinoopa doesn't see your color of skin, it doesn't see race, it doesn't see your gender, it sees whether you're walking with sincerity in your heart and you're doing what God has asked you to do on the planet. And so I have great blessing to be able to offer these ceremonies, particularly on this land, which there's a memory there that goes back thousands of years, which brings power to it. And because of that, and because we use the old way where we don't commodify or charge money, there's a lot of power there. And in regards to your ceremony, I believe you had invoked the laws when you were in Peru, and then you went to Egypt, but you were having trouble getting traction with them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if they have a lot of, forms of spiritual interference, because the first two laws are the law of freedom and the law of free will, if there's a lot of different forms of spiritual interference around you, ancestral interference and other forms of interference, it can really try to throw you off track, because anchoring in your sovereignty and your freedom is your pathway to being able to bring forth your soul's purpose on the earth. And if you're all plugged up and there's all sorts of, like, your ancestors can really try to interfere in your life if you're trying to bring your purpose forth. If they're trapped in certain vibrational states that are counterintuitive to the light you're trying to bring forth. And we brought you in ceremony, I think, which is what we do oftentimes for people, is to remove any of the external influences that would really be preventing you from being able to start stepping into your free will. And so the realm we got into was that you had quite a few ancestors that had committed suicide, that were attached to your consciousness, and which can make you very physically sick. It can also trap you in states of hopelessness and despair. Also, like, those states of hopelessness and despair can feel like they're just coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they're illogical and inexplainable. And the reason why they're there is because that person who took their life is trapped in that state, and then they're attached to you. And that is an unhealthy energetic connection, and it can be extremely debilitating. And so in your situation, that ceremony turned its focus towards, one, clearing those individuals who had taken their life that were attached into you. And then the other thing was, particularly because of your ancestral history regarding the natives in Minnesota, we asked for healing for those natives who had been hurt due to your ancestors. And we went through that process of prayer and purification and cleaning as well. And so the result was that density was cleared out in that ceremony, which then, I guess you can speak to this, but you've really been able to find a rhythm and a flow since we did that.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely, and I think I'm trying to remember I think it might have been the first time we connected, and you talked about, I think it was a woman with the connection to Okinawa.
Yes.
And I felt at that same time, I felt like a connection there, kind of that hopelessness, and didn't really understand why. And then I will say, since we were in ceremony last month, I've this feeling around this deep hopelessness that would just, like you said, like it would come out of nowhere. I could be having like a really good day, and then all of a sudden it would just like take me down. But I'd spent my entire life figuring out how to navigate that. And so I would see it and I would just kind of put it aside. Like it was like I'd become a master of like almost like avoiding that, but it was still there. And we've talked about that, like the compartmentalization of my consciousness, essentially. And I will say though, since our time in ceremony, like that is not, I feel very much at peace around that. And I don't feel that, that energy, that kind of that suicidal hopelessness energy. And it's hard to describe, and I don't know if it's maybe one of those things that like it's hard to describe unless you've had experience like thoughts of suicide, or that, where it's like that misappropriated energy, where it's not always like, it's like, who is this person? Who am I? And it's like what we've talked about is like, it's not me.
Right.
And so what I love, I want to just make sure it's really clear, because this goes back to like, when you were describing like this hierarchy of healers, quote unquote healers, and allowing ourselves to see this as an opportunity to all be back in circle. And you know, I just think of like you on the left side of me in ceremony, and then your amazing wife Maddie on the right side. And I just felt so loved and supported. And like, I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I was protected, and I felt so safe, and I felt so loved. You know, even though we were uncovering this stuff that has been literally crippling me personally and my family forever. And
Mhm.
now that is no longer part of my story. Or I guess it is part of my story, but it's not part of my present moving forward. And so I just want to bring that up because, you know, I think as someone who does a lot of work in the spirit realm, like we come into contact with a lot of people that are, you know, it's the healers and like all of this, and the medicine starts with us as individuals. Like we have to come back to ourselves, each of us, and empower ourselves, like whether we're um you know, leading country or it doesn't matter. Like every single person has our own, that's going back to free will. Like we are responsible for our own healing journey, and it, like for our families, and it starts with us. And so I think of like going through that process, it's like I'm supporting the healing of my family, and I'm supporting the healing of my son just by working on myself. So that
Yeah.
feels, you know, I don't need to fix anybody. Nobody's like, I'm not broken. I'm just working on my own stuff. And as that, you know, we're, you said, releasing some of this denser, heavier, gunkier energy so that we can fully step into who we are. And two,
Yeah,
I'm,
and ultimately that ancestral layer or density has to be addressed.
yes.
It is a because energy cannot be created or destroyed. What has happened on the earth, to the people of the earth, to our lines, everyone's lines,
Yes.
that energy is there. That weight is there, and it has to be addressed. And we've been brought tools in the past 20 years that start to allow us to be able to clean that. But cleaning the ancestral line is a necessary part of human spiritual or human consciousness evolution. I fully believe in, you know, when we're elders, this stuff we're talking about right now will be common knowledge
Yeah.
because
Let's hope so.
it has to be, like, if we're actually going to evolve to where we need to evolve. Because we see so many individuals with physical and mental health issues that are sorely tied into ancestral trauma and karma.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And
find
so,
it, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
and just that what you stated starts with us is that when you work on yourself and you clean yourself enough, you come to this point where it's time to clean your line. And ultimately, what you're doing is you're being a leader. You're being a leader for yourself. You're being a leader for your children. You're being a leader for 7 generations ahead. And you're changing the trajectory of your line. And you're being a leader for as far back as you need to go. Because suffering has to end. No more suffering. When we rebuilt our lodge this year, that was the main message. The time is now, no more suffering. And so we are called to take lead to clean our lineage, but ultimately that leadership is solely through unconditional love, freedom. So when we free ourselves, we free our ancestors, and we clear the path so that our future generations do not have to carry the same weight. It's extremely profound work. And when you go through it and you do that ancestral healing ceremony, eventually, like, it's so profound, it's almost difficult to put into words, because you feel and you know in your heart you have done something immense, but there's no way to quantify it in time and space, because it's the universe, it's creation. But it's calling people to leadership. So if you have a lot of ancestral stuff, and this is for anyone, in your face, then you are being called to be a leader for your line in this way.
I love that. And it's a new type of leadership, right?
Yes, leadership through love, through kindness,
Yeah.
through grace.
Yes. Yes.
And that's why the work
Patience.
starts within, is because we ultimately have to be able to love ourselves. And that's easy to say, but what does that actually mean? And that's where that deep connection to one's soul becomes so important. You know, and that, again, that's easy to say, but how the heck do you do that?
Oh,
And
man.
our tools are designed to do that, and they work. And those are not the only tools on the planet that do that, but I think part of the beauty of the laws is their original form. So they are part of who we are in our most purest, innocent selves of why we're here on the earth and all the good that we can do.
Yeah, and there's so many different things that are coming up right now. I just want to, acknowledge like I am excited to have the ancestral healing ceremony when it is time, just by having that experience where even with what we did, and yes, there's the ancestral healing components that came in, but it wasn't specifically targeting ancestral healing for my lines, just so that it's clear for anybody that's listening. And I can't speak specifically to what an ancestral healing ceremony looks like. But I'm assuming it's similar to what we went through.
You would be laying down on the buffalo robe, and
Okay.
and you would prepare for several months, because the ancestral healing preparation basically cleans your lineage going as far back as it needs to.
Yeah.
And then when you lead up to your ceremony, when you do the ceremony, it's basically any of the really sticky stuff that you couldn't clean as you were preparing, we address in there. And it's basically the transition of the ancestors that need to be transitioned, and the freedom of you and the freedom of them.
Okay.
And then cleaning all the cords that may be. But we have a process that basically allows the individual to clean their line as far back as they need to. It does require the individual gain some understanding of their surnames going back. But it's quite unique, because what people will do is you have this crossing over altar, which essentially helps to transition ancestors. So you put a certain surname, and I've had people put surnames from like the 1100s on the crossing over altar. And when you put that one surname, all of this energy comes through that altar that is in a certain vibrational state. So say it's like you put Smith down, and you tie that altar, and then you let that altar work for 7 days. And then all of the main vibrational states those ancestors are trapped in will come through, that you will gain an understanding of. So maybe it's intense greed, right? You'll feel that, and that will be being cleaned off of your line. Then you make these other forms of prayer ties that basically, so what if you're removing greed, what are you putting in? Giveaway, unconditional selflessness, something. So there's this process of cleaning the line, and then there's process of bringing in the energy you want to bring in to take that space of that greed. So, and it would work that way for hopelessness, it might be joy, lack of love would be loved, you know, power might be, you know, it just sort of depends on the individual, but it's a very tangible process. It's really just interesting because it allows you to truly understand, like, wow, this surname's carrying a lot of this. And the stuff where you may not address it is maybe you put a surname down and it just feels dark and evil. And that's where we discuss, and I'm like, okay, I'll work on that a little bit to help you, but we're going to leave that to really address it in the ceremonial space.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, there's intention behind everything. And too, I think, just to be clear, because we haven't talked specifically about, like, we talked about crossing over altar, but really what that is a piece of paper with the symbols. Fortunately now, like, you know, I have a printer so I can print it out because I create a lot of them instead of hand drawing them, and creating prayer ties from fabric of different colors, tobacco, tying it, and then with intention. So there's intention with each of them. And I have found, I mean, you know, like, what was it, last weekend, I was going through some really heavy stuff. And I could feel it coming forward, and I was like, oh, I gotta make a crossing over altar. And then we connected, and I went from just feeling this energy stuck in my body to almost this immediate release when I acknowledged it and created this altar. And, you know, when I first started creating them, they would take a while. And then now it's, you know, it happens, it's pretty quick. Once, you know, getting the hang of it. So I just wanted to, again, like, because altars look many different ways, but there's very much like an intention and a process that with, you know, the kind of like the program that you have laid out with the Sacred Walk Initiative, that it's very clear, like, what, you know, what the steps are. And then,
Yeah, we're very interested. I mean, we tend to be extremely pragmatic and very deliberate in all of our actions and all of our tools. Like, we've developed these tools, and or they've been brought to us. And so when you go through this process, there's so much spiritual support of using these tools that there's essentially an answer for. And that crossing over altar, it's really a purification altar. It will help spirits to transition, human spirits that are trapped. It also will clean situations. And ultimately, a human spirit that's trapped, if we go back to the fear being burned at the stake, if you tied one for those ancestors, that crossing over altar, it's a collection of 14 symbols that are tied to the universal and spiritual laws, essentially would clean that vibrational state off that trapped human spirit, bring them back into their free will, which allows them to have actualization again, and then send them over so they're no longer trapped on the astral plane. And so that's why when you tie one, even for yourself, it's cleaning the forms of inner spiritual interference that you, or misqualifications you may have on your body, off of you, which is why you notice that release. And because you have started to anchor in your free will more, you're noticing that quickening occur, which means you're cleaning out, you're becoming hollow. When you become hollow, you become more sensitive to what's going on. But the beauty of it is that sensitivity leads into discernment and knowing, which then there's a tool to use to be able to move through that next layer of the onion. And that's extremely beautiful because you just learn how multidimensional our consciousness is. And it's just really profound how multidimensional we are, and what it's also really profound the more hollow you become, you really realize our world is extremely toxic.
Yeah. Yes. I've just noticed that. I think it was about 5 years ago when I stopped watching any kind of news, and just removing that alone. Oh my, I can't even. And then just to get like a glimpse of something, whether it's like, in a restaurant or whatever, and it's just like it hits me so hard because it just feels so dense and heavy. Um, and it's someone's, view in that moment of the state of the world. And it's like, I don't want to anchor that into my vessel. I don't want to bring that into who I am and how I feel. And so it's like really being aware. That's like one example of, many. But just being really aware of, you know, people, places, and things that we allow into in our space. And then from there being open to what if we all looked at ourselves into our healing our ancestral lines in this way, and to have, I mean, again, just to have these tools readily available, the world would look a little bit different. So that's the goal. And I think, too, Luke, like I want to thank you again for, yeah, the work you're doing, and just the, going into that. It's the selfless service, and it's a, there are, yeah, I didn't tell you this, but I posted something on social media, which I don't do a lot, but last night, and I actually had said, like, you're kind of like a unicorn, because you're so unique in the way you bring in this beauty. And you don't know that because you don't have social media, which that is a goal for future me as well. So I just, yeah, do you want, I'm going to just share one more time as we wrap up, Sacred Walk Initiative. I am in the program. I'm working with you and Maddie. And if anybody feels called to this work, I would say join us, because there's a group of us that are working at, it's a community, and it feels really, really good to be supported in this way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to be doing this work collectively, and having people come into our lives that are ready to do it. So
yeah,
we're thankful.
yes. Well, thank you, Luke. I'll see you in ceremony soon. So
Yeah, we will. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
yeah, and just keep doing the good work.
You too. You're cruising along. It's great to see.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
All right,
See you
take
soon.
care. All right, bye.
Thank you for listening to the Alchemy of Me, where we navigate the anatomy of humanity through the lens of science and spirituality. For more mind-body energy medicine concepts, tools, and practices to nourish the seeds, the light, the fire, that gold of intelligence that is you, tune in every first and third Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on transformationtalkradio.com.
For more information about me and my work, please visit wildminnow.com. That's wildminnow, MINNOW.com.